So, hello and welcome to another episode, edition, installment, teaching, whatever you want to call it, of Unorthodox Moves of God in our Sunday School Remix community. I am Zakiya Monique, Master Relationship Strategist, Transformational Speaker, best-selling author of Killer Connections, and I'm also the facilitator of the Sunday School Remix lessons, the safe space. Just so much, so many things that we have to offer in our community. And so today we're talking about the unorthodox moves of God. And I want to do a very quick recap. I just like to do that to kind of get our mindset. Um, so our main scriptures, remember, there will be other scriptures, but main scriptures are here. Today we'll be going even deeper into we'll be doing Genesis 37 and 45 for sure. And we're going to start Exodus. I didn't expect to start Exodus today, but I am going to start Exodus today because I want to cover some territory and give us something to some homework to work with. So our main scriptures are here. You can take the time to kind of look those up because we did go over them in the first lesson. So if you want to go back to the first lesson, you can do that. But what's the problem? Well, the problem is that we put God in a box and we question him or the moves of God when those moves do not look like what we think they should look like based on our experiences with God. So I remember one time my cousin and we were at like a second service. So there used to be like a second service. It was called YPWW. It's called Young Women, Young People Willing Workers. And this was at our church. And so every evening at 6 o'clock or so, we would go back to service on Sundays, and we would go to YPWW, which was like another teaching of the Bible. And one day he stood up and he said that God had led him to take a $50 bill and just let it go out of the window. And everybody in that class told him it was not God. God would not have you be wasteful. God would not have you do such a thing, blah, 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 blah. But one of the things that I'm very careful about is telling somebody if they heard God or not, because that's not my place. That's what I believe. It's not my place to tell you that you did not hear God, or it's not my place to tell you that you did hear God. What is my place to do is to pray for you so that you get the clarity and the direction that you need, so that you're not following another voice or your own voice or the enemy or what have you. But it's not my job to say you didn't hear God, because again, God may be doing an unorthodox thing. And remember, I'll just say that we have to be careful, because what if he had put that $50 out of the window and let it go, and somebody was praying and the $50 came right before them? We don't know the other end of a thing, right? We don't know the other end of the thing. Just like when we're mentoring and coaching people and blessing people, we don't know if we're the planter. The Bible says God planters, one planters, one waters, and God gives the increase. We don't know if we're the planter. We don't know if we're watering. We just know we don't give the increase. That's all we know. So because there are some pieces that we do not know, we have to be very careful in telling somebody that they did not hear God. We have to be very careful in telling someone that's not what that's not this or that, unless God emphatically tells you to tell them that. We have to be careful. Even if a person is not exhibiting what we think they should be exhibiting in a call, or, if God called you, God didn't call you to be this, you don't know. So it's not our job. We have to be very careful unless God emphatically tells you to tell that person. It is not our job to discredit or to tell them that God did or did not say something. It is our job to pray, to pray for them so that they have clarity and understanding and the wisdom to operate in whatever God is telling them to do. Okay. So when something does not look like God, you have to be careful, because it may not. Because remember, we're in what they call the end times. And in the end times, what's happening is God is moving in a different way. And why is he moving in a different way? Because sometimes God has to move in a different way to deceive the enemy. To deceive the enemy, to throw off. It's no different like in a football game. In a football game, and they're in the last play and they're trying to win the game, right? Sometimes they will have the quarterback looked like he threw the ball to someone, but he didn't. He really kept it, and he runs and he makes the touchdown. Why did they have to deceive the other team? So that they can make the goal, so that they could make the touchdown. And that's what God is trying to do. He's drawing people to his kingdom, and he's doing it in a way in which people will say, oh, that couldn't have been anybody but the hand of God. That couldn't have been nobody but God. Right? And so sometimes it takes an unorthodox thing for that to happen. And it's unorthodox because we don't know the whole story. God knows what his plan is, but we don't know the whole story. So it's unorthodox to us because sometimes he'll give us a piece and just tell us to do it. And we're looking like, so you want me to put $50 out the window? Do you know how much money I got, God? You know what I'm saying? Do you know? And God is like, I know what I'm going to bless you with. Just do it. He doesn't always give us the why. He doesn't always give us the what. He doesn't always give us the plan. He doesn't always tell us that you're an answer to the prayer. He doesn't always tell us that. He just tells us, this is what I want you to do. Noah, start building the ark. Ark for what? A flood. A flood? I don't think it's ever flooded before. And where are these animals coming from? And it was a whole lot of pieces left out, as far as we know, from the readings that we have. It's a whole lot of pieces that were left out. But they said it took Moses like 50 to 75 years to build this ark. Oh, okay. So for 50 to 75 years, I'm building this ark. There's not a piece, not a cloud in sight, not a piece of rain in sight. I don't see these animals and insects and all of that you got, that you say gonna be on here with me. But I got to still keep building. Why? He gave me the peace. And then I have to show that I trust. I trust your word. I trust you. If you say it's going to rain, I don't care if it ain't a cloud in the sky, I believe you. And that's what, Noah, can you imagine the ridicule he went through? So we have to stop putting God in a box and questioning him or the moves of him when those moves don't look like, we think they should. But what we need to do is to understand that, okay, Lord, first of all, we just have to make sure it's him. Once we make sure it's him, just do it. Once we know it's God, just do it. No matter how crazy it sounds, just do it. As long as you know it's God, just do it. Okay. We may come to know the character of God, and yes, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, but his thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways. The how and the why are not always revealed right away. They're just not. But here's the assurance that we have, that when God makes a move that may cause, question, he always brings revelation for why it needed to happen at the end. Right? So when he told Noah to build the ark, when the flood came, Noah now knows why. Noah knew why he told him to use gopher wood. Noah knows why he told him to do a certain thing a certain way, why he told him to send the dove out and don't leave out. He knew why. He knew why. But that came at the end. It came at the end. So if a move of God brings about question and you know it was God, he will bring that revelation in the end as to why it needed to happen that way. And this brings vindication to the ones who were obedient but ridiculed, like Noah. Noah was obedient, but he was ridiculed because you building an ark. For what? A flood that ain't coming. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Whatever they did, And so what vindication, can you just imagine the vindication that Noah experienced when it started to rain? Right? So in the end, you will be you'll be vindicated for the ridicule and vindicated for the shame. That's why the Bible says, I'll give you double for your shame, because most of the shame that we're getting is out of doing the right thing or doing the thing that God is telling us to do in an unorthodox way. See, unorthodox simply, well, I'll get to that in just a minute. This is why we should obey no matter how ridiculous the assignment seems. And this is also why it is important for us to remain in relationship with God so that we know his voice. Even when the move doesn't seem like him, we'll know that the voice is him. Okay? So here's what I wanted to say. Unorthodox simply means it's not traditional. This is not the way that we know him to move. Okay? Not conforming to rules, traditions, or modes of conduct as of a doctrine, religion, or philosophy, not orthodox, deviating from commonly accepted beliefs or practices. So God, this is not how you normally move. This is not how you normally move, but because I know it's your voice, I will do it. So when we say unorthodox moves of God, what we're saying is uncommon moves of God. What we're saying is unconventional, non-traditional moves of God. Okay. And we have so many throughout the Bible, but yet when it happens in our lives or when it happens in the life of somebody else, we just can't believe that. Oh no, God wouldn't do that. Whoa, be careful. Be careful. Okay. So we talked about Noah and the flood in the first lesson. You may want to go back and check that out. We talked about the journey of Abram in the second lesson. You may want to go back and check that out. So today we're talking about the life of Joseph. Now, many of us know so much about Joseph. You know, we know about, that's one of the biggest, stories in the Bible, because people always want to say, the cute stuff from the pit to the palace, but they leave out the prison. They leave out the prison from the pit to the palace. They leave out the prison. And we can't leave out the prison experience, because the prison experience helps to shape us for the palace. Okay? It helps to shape us for the palace, even though we don't like it. Nobody likes the prison experience, right? No, not at all. We don't want that. Okay? So the first point that I have is that God allowed Joseph to be sold into slavery to his cousins as a means to getting him out of Canaan. Like, God, you could, you didn't want to just see if I can get a ride. Like, Lord, could I just get a ride to Canaan? Do I have to? Oh, okay. So in order to get Joseph out of Canaan, in order to send, see, we say, Lord, make every crooked place straight. And so the Lord goes before us. We say all of that stuff. But do you understand that God was sending Joseph and making a way on his behalf for his family? He was making the crooked place straight for Joseph's family through Joseph. And it was his cousins. So his brothers sold him after putting him in a pit, sold him to his cousins. Isn't that something? His brothers sold him to his cousins into slavery. And that was the unorthodox way that God used to get Joseph out of Canaan, so that he could go before, so that God would go before Jacob's family, because he had to fulfill the promise. He had to fulfill the promise of the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He had to fulfill the promise to Jacob through Joseph. But look at how he did it. The how was very, very, very unorthodox. He would have his brothers to sell him to his cousins into slavery. Okay. Where do we find this at? We always want to make sure we, talk about the scriptures. So Genesis 37. We go to Genesis 37. Joseph had two dreams, and he knew how to interpret dreams. And he wasn't the wisest, though. He was a little naive, because his brothers hated him. And if your brothers already hate you because of this coat of many colors that your father made you, and because your father loves you more than anybody else, and all of this stuff, you think it's very wise for you to tell the dream, to say that y'all gonna bow down to me. Y'all gonna bow down to me, So we already bowing down to you, because you already, think about this. We already bowing down, to some degree, because Joseph didn't have to go to the fields to work. He went to the fields to see if they were working, and went back and told his father. He didn't have, the Bible tells us that Joseph went out to see if they were working. Where do I find this at? Genesis 37. It says, let's start at the top. 1, Jacob lived in the land. I'm reading from the ESV version. Jacob lived in the land of his father, sojourning in the land of Canaan. Verse 2, these are the generations of Jacob. It goes on to talk about, Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. He wasn't really doing any work, because, and here's how I'll tell you a little bit later in the scriptures, it says that the brothers wasn't even there. So when he went to check on the brothers, they were in another whole field. So he went to check on his brothers. I'm gonna find it. Give me 1 second. He went to check on his brothers, and they weren't even there. They weren't even where he was going to find them at. Hold on, let me see where I can find this. Hold on a minute. And so when he finally found them, they saw him coming and got mad. They were like, "Oh, here he come. Here he go." They were upset with him. Hold on a minute. Let me see. I'm trying to find the scripture that says that. Or it may have been in my studies, but I know, hold on, I'm trying to find it. Okay, here it is. So in verse 17, Genesis 17, it tells you down at the bottom, because it says he was feeding the flocks, but when you go down to the bottom, it says and Israel said, verse 13. Wait, verse 12. Okay. Verse 11, and his brothers envied him, but his father observed the saying. So he even told his father that he was going to bow to him. And his father like, what? Like, sometimes let that be a lesson to us, that sometimes if God reveals something to us, we shouldn't reveal it to others. We have to stop and ask God, what am I doing with this information? Am I praying about it? Am I releasing it? What am I doing with this information? Because it may not have been the wisest thing, even though it was a part of God's plan in this regard, but it's not always the wisest thing for us to reveal every single thing that God reveals to us. Okay. Well, when we go down, it says his brothers envy him. And verse 12 says of the chapter 37, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. See, he didn't have to go. He didn't have to go and work like they did. He may have done a little work here or there, but he didn't have to go and do work like they did. It says, and Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flocks in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to them, here I am. The brothers had to go feed the flocks. He was there talking to the daddy. He already favors him already. Then he made him a coat. And now you don't have to go out and work as hard as we do. Verse 14, and he said to him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brothers. He said, go see if they working. Go see if your brother's working. And well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him and said, because he was wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, what you seeking? What you looking for? And he said, I seek my brother. And see, he didn't even know where they were. They were supposed to be here, but he wasn't with them. He didn't even know where they were. He didn't have to go and work like them because he was the favorite one, which further made them envious of him. God allowed this because he wanted the plot to go forward. Very unorthodox. Very unorthodox. God used it. It doesn't mean that he planted jealousy in their hearts, but he used it. See, God is not the author of confusion, but he can certainly use confusion. He'll use confusion amongst your enemy. He'll use it. And so they at this point, you already don't have to work like us. You got this coat of many colors. Daddy always favoring you, and then you come in to spy on us to go back and tell daddy that we're not doing what we're supposed to do. We're not even where we're supposed to be. They like, we tired of him. We are tired of him. And God allowed it. Why? Because he knew that their frustration and anger would build up to the point where they would do something. They would do something about it. And so that man in verse 15 told him, oh, in 16, he said, I seek my brother and tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. He didn't even know where they were feeding them. And the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. He didn't even know where they were. And when they saw him afar off, I'm in verse 18, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to slay him. Why? They was tired of him. They were tired of him getting all the preferential treatment, all of the father's love, the coat of many colors. You don't have to work like we have to work. They were tired of him. And God wanted them to get to this point because it takes a certain level of anger and confusion and bitterness and all of that for you to actually strike sometimes. So he allowed their anger to, be inflamed to the point where they would do something. Why? Because he was using this unorthodox way to get Joseph out of Canaan. And so they thought they were plotting the whole time. God was allowing it. Sometimes we'll think something is our idea, and God is like, girl, this is a part of my plan. If you don't go sit down, boy, I already knew what you was finna do. And so what they did was they decided at first that they were going to slay him, but then God had what? Quote unquote, a ram in the bush called Reuben. And Reuben said, Reuben was the oldest. Reuben said, we're not going to kill him. Let us not kill him. Shed no blood. Put him in the pit, but shed no blood, right? But Reuben, in his mind was, I'm going to come back and get him. So don't kill him, but I'm going to come back and get him. And when Reuben came back, Joseph wasn't there. He wasn't there. And so he allowed God, one of the first unorthodox acts that I witnessed was God allowed Joseph to be sold into slavery, because after they put him in the pit, they were going to leave him there. Then they were like, no, let's sell him. Let's make some money off of him. Let's make some money off of him. And so they stripped him out that coat. They put him in the pit. Then after a while, it was like, oh, you know what? No, let's make some money off of him. So they sold him. Go down to verse 28. It says, then there passed by. Now, just so happened to be passing by at the time. Come on now. Then there passed by Midianites. Those were their cousins, merchant men. And they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. The Ishmaelites were their cousins. I'm sorry, I said the Midianites. The Ishmaelites were their cousins. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. God needed Joseph to get out of Canaan and to go into Egypt. And that's the way that he chose for Joseph to get there. By way of betrayal. By way of betrayal. Hurtful, huh? Think back to some of the times when you've been betrayed. Think back to some of the times where you've been hurt. And then, so now not only did your brothers hurt you, but your cousins too. Yeah. You remember the Ishmaelites, right? Who are they named after? Ishmael. Who's Ishmael? Isaac's brother. They were their cousins. So not only am I betrayed by my brothers, but then my cousins sold me. Like, wow. Right? Yeah. It says, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar. Okay. So let me clarify. The Midianites merchant men took Joseph up out the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites. Okay. Sold him to the Ishmaelites. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. He ended up with Potiphar, who was powerful. He was an officer of Pharaoh, a captain of the guards. So he's now in a better place, per se, than the pit, but he on his way to prison. He on his way to prison. So the first order of business is God, the unorthodox move of God is God allowed Joseph to be sold into slavery to his cousins as a means to get him out of Canaan. Like I said, it's like, God, there's no other way. You couldn't just let me get a camel or something. You know what I'm saying? But that's the way that God chose to use. The second point that I wanted to make is God allowed Joseph to be sold into slavery to Potiphar, but he was elevated to second in command. He had the favor of God upon him to the point where Potiphar let him be, over everything except him and his wife. And so it says, and it came to pass, I'm reading from Genesis 39, verse 5. Well, I'll start at 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guards, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites. which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptians. This is how we know when it's an unorthodox move of God, because even in the midst of all of this confusion, what did it say that Joseph had? The favor of God. The favor of God. It says he was a prosperous man. How are you prosperous, sir? You're in slavery. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hands. And Joseph found what? Grace in his sight. And he served him, and he made him overseer over his house. And all that he had, he put unto his hands. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. That's another way that we know when it's an unorthodox move of God, and we are functioning in that, because people will be blessed just from us. Just from us being in that place, just from us being in the presence, because we're carrying the presence of God. We're in the midst of God's assignment. So when we're there, people are blessed because we're there. Because we're carrying the presence of God. We're acting as an agent of God. We're on assignment. Joseph was on assignment, even though it may not have felt like it, looked like it. He was on assignment the whole time, and he didn't even know it. But he found grace. He found favor to the point where Potiphar's like, hey, Potiphar don't even know him, but he saw that the Lord was with him. He saw it. And so he said, listen, I see this favor with you. Let me put all my stuff in your hands, because God is going to make whatever you touch prosper. Yeah. It says he left all that he had in Joseph's hands. All. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. That's verse 6. The only thing that he didn't leave to Joseph was what he was going to eat. That's it. He like, what I'm going to eat, and my wife is hands off. But other than that, hey, do you. Do you. And then the master's wife cast her eyes upon him, and he was fine, okay? Joseph was fine as wine in the summertime, looking like something good and divine. You understand me? Joseph was fine. That's one of the reasons when I did my studies why they kind of wanted to, put him into slavery, because he was built, his dexterity was physical, like his physical was stacked. Joseph was stacked. You hear me? And so because his physical dexterity was stacked, they like, oh, we can get some money off him as a slave, because he looked like a worker. So his body, just imagine his banging body, and he was fine. The Bible said he was fine. Okay? Okay, that's my version. That's the 2024 version. But it said that he was well favored and a goodly person and well favored. He was fine. Okay? The Bible has a way of describing people, because they said that Leah was tender-eyed. That meant she was ugly. Leah was tender-eyed. That meant she was tender on your eyes. She was tender-eyed. They're like, uh-oh, Leah was ugly. The Bible got a way of letting you know, like, sis was not it. Okay? But he was well favored, is what they meant. Just like it talks about Moses being handsome, and it's for a reason. Again, God used Joseph's dexterity. God used everything. How Joseph looked, how handsome he was. Joseph was handsome. And God used that to do what? To attract Potiphar. Why? Because Joseph needed to go to prison to have that experience. He needed to have the jail experience. He needed it, because the jail experience prepared him for the palace experience. Okay, but we don't like to talk about that, because that don't make people feel good. It don't. But truly, it's often in those times that we have those prison and pit experiences when God can really communicate with us, because we won't slow down and allow him to do so otherwise. We want to allow him to minister to us and to bless us. So he will have to isolate us and put us in the belly of a whale or a great fish. Some people say great fish, it wasn't a whale, whatever. But sometimes he has to put us in that cold, dark place. Sometimes he has to put us in the pit. Sometimes he has to put us in the prison. Can't you see the commonalities of these places? Cold, dark, wet, sometimes, you know, but ultimately isolation. So whether your pit, your pit or your prison looks like God isolating you to himself and bringing you out of all of your relationships. I remember when it happened for me in 2012. God hit every one of my relationships. It seemed like I fell out with everybody. And I was like, God, am I the problem? Because I'm the only common denominator and I don't understand what's happening. What did I do? And I literally hadn't done anything. Like for real. I hadn't done anything, but everybody it just seemed like I just fell out with everybody. Why? Because God was like, I need to talk to you. I need to speak to you about a few things. I need to speak to you. And I need you to myself. Because I need you in this time. That's the time that we're often built up. But we don't see it that way because it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy. Okay. And so Joseph refused her because she was like, hey, I want you to lay with me. Okay. You know, in other words, I want to hit that. All right. That was the 2024 version again. My bad. But anyway, I want to go ahead on and lay down with you. Okay. She wanted to lay down. Okay. But he refused. And he said to his master's wife, behold, my master, you know, I can't do that to him. And I'm definitely not going to do that to God. In other words, I'm not going to do that to him and I'm not going to do that to God. And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie with her or to be with her. So she was, she was on his head. She was on Joseph. I might have said Jacob. Forgive me if I said Jacob. She was on Joseph. She was on his head about sleeping with her. Can you imagine if it would have been a man from today that wasn't really saved, that was really kind of in the church, but the church wasn't in him? He'd have been hit that. She was applying pressure, and he kept saying nope, 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 nope. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men in the house, and she caught him by the garment. Now she getting forceful. And she done grabbed up on him, talking about lay with me. Girl, no. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got, and got on out of there. And so what did she do? She lied and said that he tried to, sleep with her and tried to rape her or what have you. And because she had a piece of his garment from him running from her, she used that. And if we go down to, we're still in Genesis 39 to 19, and it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. So now you mad. You mad at Joseph, but you didn't even hear his part. This was just the person that you said you trusted with everything you had, with the exception of what you was going to eat in your wife. You trusted him with everything you had. You saw the Lord upon him, but you didn't even get this side of the story. You just believed your wife. And let me just say this. People know who they be married to, okay? You know, this ain't the first time your wife done slid on you. This ain't the first time your wife done lied on somebody. But sometimes we just want to believe, and this is me talking. This ain't the Bible, but sometimes we just want to believe our spouse because, you never know what was going on. He was still a man. Even though it was years and years ago, he was still a man, and he probably felt like, dang. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to know the truth. I'm gonna just accept what she's saying is true because I don't want to know the truth. And so what did it say? And Joseph's master took him and put him in prison. Like, whoa, you ain't gonna get my side of the story? Nope. Nope. A place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph. Again, this is how we know when it is an unorthodox move of God, because it don't matter where you go. It don't matter as long as you are on assignment, God is with you. Even when we mess up, he's still with us. He goes before us. He factored all of that in as long as we're on assignment. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him what? Favor again in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So when he was in Potiphar's house, he gave him favor with Potiphar. When he was, with his brothers, he gave him favor with the brothers because they were going to kill him. And they were like, no, let's sell him. That's favor. Even though those are two tough options, but that's still favor. They didn't take his life. They sold him. Favor. Go to Potiphar's house. Second in command. Favor. Go to prison. Second in command. Favor. It says, and the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all of the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. And it says the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand. That means he ain't even go behind Joseph. If I keep saying Jacob, forgive me, y'all. Y'all know who I'm talking about. That he didn't even go behind Joseph. Whatever Joseph did was good enough because he trusted the God in him. He saw the God in him. He saw the favor on his life. Why did it say that? Because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Even in jail, he prospered and was favored. Even in Potiphar's house, he prospered and was favored. Even in the pit, he prospered and was favored. We have to understand that prosperity doesn't always mean money. Sometimes there are some things that we can have that are more advantageous and that are more useful than money. When you have the favor of God on your life, that can open doors for you that money can't even buy. It can give you things and get you in the doors that money can't get you into. So prosperity includes more than just wealth. That's one part of it. But the favor of God is the prosperity that we should seek. Okay? So the second unorthodox move of God is that Joseph was put in jail for doing the right thing with Potiphar's wife, just so that he could once again be second in command and meet the cupbearer and the baker. He needed that experience. It was part of the plan. But was it unorthodox? Absolutely, because God, I did the right thing. I did the right thing. How did I get in trouble? That's what it seemed like. It seemed like he got in trouble for doing the right thing. I remember when I was working a job, I was working at a law firm, and I was laid off for doing the right thing. And I was like, God, I don't understand this. But I was so comfortable at that job that I never would have left. And God was like, I need you out of here because I need you to move to the next place. Sometimes our feet are so planted in a place, and God is saying, I want you to move, but we're so planted in that place and we get comfortable in that place. And so God is like, okay, I'll move you. I'll move you. Okay. And it proved when it was all said and done, it proved to be a blessing because the place he moved me to paid off almost $250,000 in student loan debt. The place that he moved me to offers some things that help with the remainder of God's plan. You know, it helps with the rest of God's plan to be able to launch me the way that he wants to launch me. So if I had not moved, then I may have missed those opportunities. You see what I'm saying? But he had to move me because he was like, okay, she's just not going to move. She's just not going to move. Let me move her. Let me move her myself. Since she's not going to move, I'll move her myself. Okay? So the second thing is, like I said, Joseph was put into prison for doing the right thing, and God allowed that. But he needed to meet the cupbearer and the baker. He needed that. Okay? The next order of business is that although the cupbearer forgot Joseph, God created a situation where Joseph's gifts would be needed. No one else could interpret the dream. So let's talk about that. That's the third point that I want to make. So I'll say it again. The third point. So the first point was God allowed Joseph to be sold into slavery to his cousin as a means to get him out of Canaan. Point number 2, God allowed Joseph to be sold into slavery to Potiphar, but elevated to second in command. Point 3, God allowed Joseph to be put in jail for doing the right thing with Potiphar's wife, just so that he could once again be second in command and meet the cupbearer and the baker. Point number 4, I want to make sure I got all the points out. Point number 4, although the cupbearer forgot Joseph, God created a situation where Joseph's gifts would be needed. No one else could interpret the dream. So that's a reminder for us that your gift will make room for you. Okay. And Joseph was ready because he had plenty of leadership experience in unorthodox situations and settings. So he had already had this leadership experience. Everywhere he went, he was a leader. Everywhere he went, he was a leader. Even with his father, he'd go out and see if they were doing right. Oh, okay. Got to Potiphar's, he's over everything. Got to prison, he's over everything. And so what happened is, if we fast forward, it first happened with the baker and the cupbearer having dreams. He interpreted their dreams, okay? And it came to pass. Everything he said came to pass. So then in Genesis 41, Pharaoh has a dream. Now, the baker was killed, the cupbearer was restored. When the cupbearer was restored, Joseph said, don't forget about me. He said, I'm not going to forget about you. I'm not going to forget about you. He got back to the palace and forgot about him for 2 years. Why? Because God allowed that. Why? Because Joseph needed a little bit more experience. Maybe Joseph needed a little bit more healing to his heart. Because remember, Joseph was removed from Canaan by way of betrayal, remember? So you don't think his heart might have been a little, toward his brothers, and God may have needed more time. Whatever the case was, Joseph needed more time. He needed more time. And so God allowed the 2-year extension, of the cupbearer forgetting about Joseph, so that Joseph could have more experience in the prison. Not exactly the place that you want to, somebody to forget you, huh? So with that being said, Pharaoh has a dream. This is Genesis 41. And he dreamed about these cows. And he's like, I don't understand this. And so when he told the butler, when he told the butler about this dream, it was troubling him. Because he's like, what is this? What these cows mean? The cupbearer remembered, I was supposed to, bring Joseph to you. There was a young man, a Hebrew servant, and we told him about our dreams and when we were in prison, and he interpreted our dreams, and everything that he said came to pass. He was like, so Pharaoh like, go get him. Shoot. Like, why are we still talking? Go get him. And they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself. Joseph was like, I'm going to see the king. I'm not going to see the king looking like a prisoner. Leadership. Leadership says, a hasty person would have said, oh, take me to the king, just like I am. Joseph had acquired wisdom. He had acquired a certain level of leadership that taught him you don't go before the king any kind of way, because he didn't go before God any kind of way. See, oftentimes God is our example, whether it's as a husband. How you going to say, I love my husband, I'm going to trust my husband, I'm going to do all these things if you don't do none of it for God? Many of us say, I'm ready to be a wife, but we're not even a good daughter. We're not a good daughter. We're not a good servant. We're not good to the one who is our first example. God will know when we're truly ready for to be a wife by the way that we steward our relationship with him. But the way that Joseph was in relationship with God, he knew how to present himself to the king, because of how he presented himself to God. And so Joseph like, hold up, I got to shave, I got to get myself together. Even after being left for 2 years, he like, whoa, hold on, I got to wait, hold on. I got to get myself together before I go before the king. And so he heard the dream, and he told him what it meant. And after he told him what he meant, what happened? If we go down to Genesis 41, starting at verse 38, it says, and Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this? This is a man whom the Spirit of God is with. Like, he saw the Spirit of God on him, just like Potiphar, just like the prison keeper. And what happened? He said, there is none as wise and discreet as thou art. You don't think that Pharaoh took into account that Joseph came before him properly? That was factored in too, because it said wise and discreet. He then said in verse 40, thou shalt be over my house, and according unto my word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Once again, Joseph is second in command over everything. Over everything. And so even though that cupbearer had forgot Joseph, God created a situation where nobody but Joseph was the answer to make the cupbearer remember him when the time was appointed. When God felt like Joseph had full forgiveness in his heart, when God felt like Joseph had the leadership at the level that he needed it to be, when God felt like Joseph was ready, he made his gift. I mean, nobody else could do what was necessary for Joseph. He made the cupbearer remember. Your gift will make room for you. And Joseph was ready because he had had plenty of leadership experience in unorthodox situations and settings. And that was important because of this famine was not going to be just an ordinary famine. It was going to be horrible. And God needed him to exhibit leadership in an unorthodox situation. And guess what? He had had plenty of practice. He had had plenty of practice. Okay, plenty of practice. All right. So that was that point. All right. God allowed Joseph to be in the position to provide for his entire family. Okay, entire family. So this we'll see from Genesis 42 on down. You can read it yourself, but I'm just gonna kind of take us through that. Because they went back and forth a couple times. The brothers came to get food, then they went back, and then they came back and all of that. So they went back and forth quite a few times. So you can go all the way to Genesis 40, 45. Yeah. And then they finally come to Genesis 46, where Jacob now moves to Egypt. So, he first he had to, test him and then try him and see, is dad alive? Is Benjamin alive? And then he tested them. He did some different things to them to kind of see where their heads were at. And then finally, after all the back and forth and all of that, Jacob moves to Egypt. And it says that in Genesis 46, it talks about how he moved 66 people plus the daughters-in-law. So it was 66 descendants of Jacob that moved, plus the daughters-in-law. Plus the daughters-in-law. And that's in Genesis 46. And it talks about 66 people. Then that's not including the daughters-in-law. Okay. Now, again, remember, God allowed Joseph to be in position. What does in position mean? He had a position of power. He had a position of wealth, but he also had a position of a healed heart. He had a position of a healed heart to be able to restore. To be able to cover, to be able to restore his brothers, to be able to take care of them, to move them there and to take care of them in the middle of this grievous famine, because he very well could have said, I don't care if y'all starve, y'all ain't care about me. But he at one point looked at them and said, y'all didn't do this to me. God allowed this. So at some point he understood he got a revelation of this assignment, that this whole time it was God. From the pit to the prison, from the pit to the slavery, to the prison, to the palace, all of it was God. And at some point he got that revelation and realized, oh, okay, this wasn't about my brothers at all. This was about me coming before them so that they would not be harmed in the midst of this famine. They would be, why? Because God is keeping a promise to who? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. So, and the next point that I want to make is, let me finish the piece. So imposition also means that God healed Joseph's heart in the time of separation from his family so that his position of power would not be mishandled and the plan of God would prevail. Understand this. Sometimes we can get a position of power, but can you just imagine 57% of people leave jobs they love because of bosses that they hate, okay? And this is because oftentimes we have so many people that are in positions of power that have not worked out their soul salvation with fear and trembling. They have not done their work. They have not dealt with the betrayals and the rejections and all of those things. And so then they mishandle and misappropriate power. And this very well could have been Joseph. And to be honest with you, many people would have, probably been like he was right, because his brothers didn't have to do him like that. Sometimes people will tell you, well, you do have a right to feel that way. He didn't have to help them. He had gone through that. I ain't got to help y'all. Why y'all ain't saved nothing? It's 66 of y'all. It's one of me. Why y'all didn't save nothing? But his heart had changed in the time that he had gone through all of this stuff. His heart, he was at the point, obviously, of total healing and restoration. Because see, sometimes we can heal or forgive, but we don't want to restore. And God may be telling us to restore that person. And we like, because they hurt me. He like, I know, but I restore him. And he like, because they hurt me. So whatever he went through, and I'm not adding nothing to the word of God, I'm just saying that that they just imagine Joseph had to be at the point of a totally healed heart. And God revealed to him the whole plan. Listen, see, I sent you here. This happened because I allowed it, and I allowed this for this reason. See, in the end, remember what I told you under the assurance tab? In the end, God always vindicates. In the end, God always show you why it had to happen that way. In the end, we just have to endure to the end. Okay? So that was that point. And so the final point for Joseph's life is that God gave, that I have today, God gave Jacob prophecy that Ephraim was to get the blessing as if he was the firstborn, because he would be greater than his brother. So Joseph had 2 children. Remember, Jacob didn't even think he was going to see Joseph again. But when he got there, okay, because remember, in chapter 46, Jacob moved to Egypt. By chapter 47, Jacob's family settles in Goshen. Okay. When you keep moving, we get to chapter 48, and now Jacob is dying. He's coming on down to the end of his life, right? And it says in verse 8, Genesis 48:8, and Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, who are these? And Joseph said unto his father, they are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place. And he said, bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Jacob's first time meeting Joseph's kids, he blessed them. Here's another unorthodox move of God. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so that he could not see. And so Joseph brought the children near unto him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, so Jacob says unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face. He said, I didn't think I was going to see you again, but God has shown me your seed also. So not only did I see you, but I got a chance to see your children. And it says in verse 12, we're in Genesis 48:12, and Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and he left in his left hand upon Manasseh, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. So he crisscrossed his hands. Joseph put them where his father was supposed to bless them, because Manasseh was supposed to get the blessing as the firstborn. Jacob crisscrossed his hands and gave Ephraim the blessing. Okay, but before he gave Ephraim the blessing, it said Joseph tried to take his father's hands and put them back right. So in verse 17, it says, and when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hands to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, not so, my father, this is the firstborn. So he's thinking maybe he don't know, maybe because he can't see, and maybe because it's the first time meeting him. No, daddy, this is the firstborn. It says, and his father refused and said, I know it, my son. I know it. He also shall become a people, and he shall be great. But his brother, his younger brother, oh, he will be greater than him, and his seed will become a multitude of nations. Unorthodox move of God. Jacob had never met those boys. That was God. Jacob had never met those boys before that day. His eyes were dim. He could barely see them, but he knew what God told him to do. He crisscrossed his hands and gave the blessing to Ephraim because Ephraim had it in him to become a greater nation than Manasseh. And God knew he would be a greater nation. He knew he would need the blessing. See, sometimes we see the blessing as just a favor, but he knew he would need the blessing for what God had for him to do. He crisscrossed his hands. He could barely even see, but he crisscrossed his hands and gave the blessing to Ephraim. And Joseph relaxed and let his father do what he did because he recognized the hand of God on his father. He knew, my daddy ain't never met them before today. So this must be God. Okay. And so if you have some, I'm going to pause right now. If you're watching this, you can share some of the unorthodox moves of Joseph that we may not have discussed. If you have a few, and I'm going to pause right now for those in class to share any that they may have. Okay, so that was the life of Joseph, and this is not an all-inclusive list. So again, if you have any that you want to share, please do share your unorthodox moves of God that you saw in the life of Joseph that we may not have mentioned. And again, if I use Joseph and Jacob interchangeably, forgive me because I often do that and mix them up when I'm talking about them. So let us move on now to the wilderness experience of Moses and the children of Israel. Ooh, the Exodus. Ooh-wee. A lot of unorthodox moves here, buddy. I promise you. So we're not going to finish this one today, but I did want to at least start this one. So with the children of Israel, let's go to Exodus 1. Let's go to Exodus 1. So at this point, we're talking about the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob. That's what they said, okay? So it talks about, it named all of them. Joseph eventually died, and all his brothers and all that generation, okay? And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. But there was a new king, and that new king did not know Joseph. And so he said, look here, we can't let them keep multiplying because then they eventually try to overthrow us here in Egypt. So we can't have it. Because remember, they came to Egypt to, to be with Joseph because he took care of them. So they ended up staying. Okay. But it's been a couple of generations at this point. And so at this time, Pharaoh don't know, Joseph's name doesn't hold any weight anymore, because he's gone, and so now they're like, let us apply pressure. So a new king came over Egypt and he didn't know Joseph. And so he looked at them as a threat. And so he said, let's apply some pressure. Let's apply some pressure. So my first point of unorthodox moves of God for the children of Israel is that God allowed the children of Israel to continue to flourish and multiply despite the efforts of Pharaoh to afflict and reduce them in number. He told them to start being hard on them so as to reduce them. Okay? Looking at Exodus 1 and 9, he says, and he said unto his people, and this is Pharaoh they're talking about, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemy and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. So in other words, he like, let us afflict them so much so that we will kill them or reduce them greatly in number. But if we go a little further down, what did they say happened? Verse 12, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. So the more they tried to reduce them in number, the greater they became. That's an unorthodox move of God, because God's hand was on their life because of the promises that he had made to their forefathers. Sometimes God's hand is upon our lives because of the covenant that he made with our grandmothers and things of that nature. And see, we don't understand that just like we can be in a good covenant with grandparents, we can also have an evil covenant with grandparents and our forefathers based on what they did. That's why we have to come out of agreement with some things. We have to come out of agreement with some things, okay? But in this instance, they were under a good covenant. Their forefathers, God had made promises to the forefathers, and so as a result, he was keeping his word for them, even though the forefathers were gone. And so the first order of business, the first bullet point that we have for the children of Israel is that God allowed them to continue to flourish and multiply, even though they were afflicting them to reduce them in number. Okay, that's number one. Number two, so if we go down to the bottom, when that wasn't working, when the affliction wasn't working and they just kept on multiplying and growing, at that point, it was like, okay, we got to come up with something else, because working them hard is not doing anything. And so the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew wives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other was Puah. And he said, when ye do the service of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. So he told Shiphrah and Puah, when you go to deliver babies of Hebrew women, kill all the sons. Kill all the sons. Let the daughters live. Verse 17, but the midwives feared God. Let me tell you as a point of information, this is not an unorthodox move of God. Well, it can be. God always has somebody in the enemy's camp that will serve him. He always has somebody. It's always a leak in the building. He always has somebody whose heart will turn or change that will reveal what's going on in the enemy's camp, that will help along the way. It said, but the midwives feared God. And what else? And they did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men, children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have you done such a thing and have saved the men, children alive? He said, didn't I tell you to kill them boys? In other words, didn't I tell you to kill them? Why didn't you do what I said? Verse 19, and the midwife said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. So he like, they already had delivered. Let me read another version of this. I had switched over to King James. Let me read another version of this for you. I like the ESV. The ESV version says, but the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? And let the male children live. The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwives even come. But that was a lie. But what happened? Here's the unorthodox move. Here's the second bullet point. God dealt well with the midwives and gave them families, even though they lied. Now, I'm not suggesting that we go out lying now, but they were on assignment. They were on assignment. The midwives said, verse 20, so God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. But they had lied. But they were on assignment for the Lord. Yeah. Okay. The next point, the next unorthodox move of God, God allowed baby Moses to be placed in the Nile River in a basket. It's the Nile River today. It was something else back then. But he allowed baby Moses to be placed in the Nile River in a basket and catch the attention of Pharaoh's daughter. Did you hear me say a basket? Did you hear me say a basket? Looking at Exodus 2, verse 3, it says, when she could hide him no longer. So remember, Hebrew males were supposed to be killed. Since the midwives wouldn't do it, Exodus 1 says, 1 and 22 says, then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews, you shall cast into the Nile, but let the daughters live. So he like, since I can't get the midwives to do it, I'll just tell everybody. And so it's pretty much a hit out on any Hebrew male that's born. Here comes Moses, a Hebrew male that's born. But God is like, but I need him to lead my people. So because of the plan and the hand on his life, God is like, okay. It said that he was a fine child. Remember, I told you the Bible describes how folk look. Okay. It says the woman, so it says, let's start in verse Exodus 2 and 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could no longer hide him, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the river bank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done with him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. While her young women walked beside the river, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call you a nurse? Now the daughter was watching. And here's another unorthodox move of God. The daughter was watching. So he was never in the raging part of the Nile, but he very well could have gone. Anything could have happened to him in a basket. In a basket. You're by this raging river in a basket. Okay? Anything could have happened. He was by the reeds, but he could have easily slid on into the Nile River. Anything could have happened. Animals could have came, could have come. Anything could have happened. But God watched over him, and his sister was sitting from afar. And when she saw Pharaoh's daughter get him, she said, you want me to call a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? In an unorthodox move of God, Pharaoh's daughter said, yeah, can you get a Hebrew woman to nurse him? Guess who the little girl went and got? Her mama. So in an unorthodox move of God, Moses' mother was paid to nurse him. Paid to nurse her child, which in turn also let her know that her child was okay. The daughter sitting around, she made sure the baby was okay. She got paid to nurse her own child. Unorthodox move of God, for sure. Okay. So God allowed baby Moses to be placed, in, I should say, alongside of the Nile River, but he wasn't hurt. And he very well could have went right on out into the river in that basket, but he wasn't hurt. Okay. The next thing that I want to mention, the next unorthodox move of God, is that God allowed the children of Israel to be oppressed to the point where they would cry out for God's intervention. If you go down to the bottom, Moses has grown up now at this point. He has committed a crime. He's fled, so he's in another land. But all the way down at 2 and 23, it says, during those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groanings, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Remember what I said, he kept his word. He kept his word, but he allowed them to get to the point of groaning to call out to him. Sometimes in pride, we won't call out to God. Sometimes God will allow a person to be afflicted. They call it, oh, you hitting rock bottom. He would allow them to hit rock bottom so that they will call out on him and repent, because he wishes that none would die. He don't want nobody to die and be lost. And so sometimes some people are so full of pride, and sometimes some people won't heed to his warnings and won't heed and turn. See, the Bible says if we confess our sins, God is faithful and just to forgive and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. So the minute that we turn from our wicked ways, he'll hear from heaven, forgive our sins, heal our land, but not before that time. And so a lot of times when people are hard-hearted and hard-headed, stubborn-willed, he will let them hit rock bottom. He will let them get to the point of devastation and oppression and whatever else, so that they can he'll bring them to their knees so they can pray, so they can call out on him. And then he will intervene and step in and change a thing. And that's what he's getting ready to do for the children of Israel. But this is all a part of his plan. Okay? It was all a part of his plan. And so God allowed the children of Israel to be oppressed to the point where they would cry out for his intervention, because now he's like, now I can do my thing. Now I can, get involved. And don't get me wrong, God can get involved anyway, but sometimes he wants us to trust that he can. Because when we pray and ask him to do a thing, we obviously believe that he can, right? So that's that. All right, so next we move to Exodus 3. And in Exodus 3, the unorthodox move of God was that God appeared in the burning bush that was not consumed. So it's like, uh-oh. He appeared in a burning bush that was not consumed. And due to his presence, another thing that happened was he made the place where Moses was holy. Where am I reading this from? Exodus 3. Let's start at verse 1. Now Moses, iPad and Wendy. Hold for one moment. Let me grab the other. So if we look at Exodus 3. Exodus 3. It says, now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. He like, okay, hold on, because something in the milk ain't clean. Why is this burning, but it ain't burning up? Wait a minute. The New Living Translation says, there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said unto himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. He like, let me go see it. And when the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Moses says, here I am. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. What made it holy ground? The encounter with God. The encounter with God made it at holy ground. Okay. He says, it says, when Moses heard this, he covered his face because he didn't want to look at the Lord. He was afraid. Okay. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I've heard their cries, their distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their sufferings. So I've come down to rescue them. So in other words, he told Moses, hey, so yeah, I need you to go do something for me. I need you to go do something for me. I need you to handle something. And so he starts to tell Moses what he needs for him to handle. But he had to get Moses' attention. And how did he choose to do it? Through a burning bush that never burned up. Unorthodox move of God. Unorthodox move of God. Because see, what he also knew is that Moses had a lot of unbelief in his heart. You know, he had a lot of unbelief in his heart. So he always knew that when he went at Moses, he had to go at Moses with different things. He had to go at Moses in a way where, okay, you got to see that I'm God. You got to believe that I'm God. Had he just walked up to Moses and said, I'm the Lord, Moses would have been like, yeah, right. But when he showed up in a burning bush that didn't burn up, Moses was like, we got action. We got action. But the problem is, Moses, when it came time for him to believe that God would do great wonders through him, that's when the fight started. Because he was like, wait, they're not going to listen to me. God, like, they're going to listen because I'm going to tell you what to say. He like, but I stutter. Like, he had a million excuses. And so here are a few other unorthodox moves of God. God told Moses, take the staff in your hand, throw it on the ground. When he threw it on the ground, it became a serpent. Moses ran. Moses ran, right? And then he said, take it by its tail. He took it by its tail and it turned into a staff again. Then he told him, hey, listen, so put your hand in your cloak. When he put his hand in his cloak and he took it back out, it was leprous. When he put it back in, took it back out again, it was right. He was like, these are the things I'm going to have you do in front of the children of Israel so that they will know I'm with you. Moses was still negotiating, baby. He was like, but they ain't going to listen to me, but I'm stuttering, but this, but that, but this, but that. And God is like, will you please go? They called me. They called me and you're making me look like a liar. My question to you is, if God is calling you, are you making him look like a liar to the one that's waiting for him? Because when we're not in place, God is like, I need you to go. They called on me in chapter 2. Here we are in chapter 3 and 4, negotiating still. Go. You making me look like a liar. Wherever God is calling us to, whatever he's calling us to do, we got to get in position. Because there are some people that are committed to our trust for us to lead them back to him. And don't get me wrong, God always has a ram in the bush, but those people were committed to you to do the thing. It's a part of his plan. And when you don't get in position and delay it, he like, you making me look like a liar. The children of Israel, they came to him the second chapter. Lord, help us. And it said he heard their groans and he said, okay. You know, in other words, he set out to help them. But they didn't see nothing happening. It got worse. And they like, oh my gosh, what was the point of praying? Right? All because of what? He wouldn't go. He didn't believe in himself. He didn't believe that God could do mighty works through him. And if we're honest, many of us have Moses moments too. We have Moses moments too. So a couple of other unorthodox moves is that God turned the staff into a serpent and back into a staff to prove to Moses that he had power and that he would go before him. Like, I need you to do this. That's Exodus 4. God turned Moses' hand leprous and then back to normal after he put it inside his cloak, again, to prove his power. He's like, you don't have to be afraid. I have all power and I'm going before you. And I'm going to speak through you. I'm going to tell you what to say. Don't worry. I'll make provisions for you. Will you please go? And then he told him, he says, listen, this is an unorthodox move number. Oh, I don't know what number we're on, but this is another unorthodox move. God hardened Pharaoh's heart to demonstrate his power to the children of Israel for the road ahead. That's Exodus 5 and we can see that in Exodus 5, and we can also see it in Exodus 7, chapter 7, verse 1 through 5. So Exodus 5 shows it, and then Exodus 7, verses 1 through 5 show it. He basically hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he can keep doing these different plagues so that the children of Israel can see his mighty works and wonders. He wasn't doing this for Pharaoh. All of them was going to get killed at the Red Sea. So he wasn't doing this for them. He was doing this so that the children of Israel would know him to be God. So that he would win them over, so that they would follow him, so that he could keep his promise. The next unorthodox move of God is when God sent help, he also allowed things to get worse. That was Exodus 5 and 23. So when we go over to Exodus 5 and 23, let me get over there real quick. So we get to Exodus 5:23, it says, then Moses went back to 22. Then Moses went back to the Lord and protested, why have you brought all this trouble on your own people, Lord? Why did you send me? 23, ever since I came to Pharaoh as your spokesperson, he's been even more brutal to your people. Have you done nothing to rescue them? He said, why you send me here? It got worse. He like, what did you send me for again? So even when God sent help, he allowed things to get worse. Why? So that he could then perform all of the plagues. All of the plagues. And we'll go into those next week, okay? But we want to, so your homework is to go into further unorthodox moves of God through the children of Israel, okay? Starting with the plagues. Okay, starting with the plagues. And look at the plagues. We know the plagues were unorthodox, but look at why they were unorthodox, right? And we want to shine some light on that, okay? So I'll stop right now for questions and prayer.